yeah, we do have a set of questions that are just pretty standard. But we thought we could just like have conversations and just sort of float like pretty natural conversation.
For sure.
And just go through it. So we've already discussed your background a little bit for the camera. Can you just describe who you are, how you got here, etc.?
Yeah, and should I be looking into the camera?
It's whatever. It's casual.
Cool. Yeah, I'm JP Grant. I graduated from McDonogh in 2008. Went to Penn and did that for the 4 years, graduating in 2012. After I graduated, I spent roughly 6 years in finance, and it was a really great experience. Learned a lot of hard skills. Learned a lot about myself. After that, I went to business school just to take a step back and refresh. I'd clearly been doing the finance thing for some time, and it was great and learned a lot, met a lot of really interesting, smart people, but knew that there was just sort of more to me than just like being a finance guy. And went to Columbia, had the opportunity to just like reset and like focus on me and focus on like the things that like on a personal level that I enjoy, and trying to figure out like how I'm going to take my career in a different direction when I graduated. As you all know, like the pandemic was pretty wild, and it forced people to take a lot of different or alternative routes. And so I was doing a bunch of random stuff. I drove for Postmates, DoorDash, Uber for a couple months. Worked at a real estate developer for a couple months. Did some consulting projects because I really wanted to make an effort to get into like the tech and startup atmosphere after graduation, and making a transition from finance and into like a pretty quantitative role to more commercial like tech role was pretty difficult, and I wound up landing at a company called Better, and recently joined a small fintech company called Fiat.
Cool. So who was the JP Grant at McDonogh? I know we know you played football, you were in RL. Were you sports oriented mostly, extracurriculars? Or?
Yeah, good question. Sports I think was like it was a good part of who I was, but I would say, I didn't really develop my like sort of talents or prowess until sort of like more senior year. I think for me, I was more of just kind of the guy that like knew everybody, and whether it was the athletes, whether it was people in the arts. I was in the jazz band for from like 5th grade to 12th grade. I just felt like it was like a lot of people from different backgrounds had a lot of different things to offer, and I tried to make time to learn about a lot of different populations at McDonogh. And so I struggle even today to figure out like what's the thing that makes me unique. And I think I was always just pretty genuine then, and call it like it is, call it like I see it. And now it's sort of the same thing where in my roles now it's sort of like people trust me, and I think that's something that I really developed at McDonogh.
That's cool.
How was I think you described you had a pretty unique path to where you are now. How do you have learned from that, and how has your character changed since McDonogh and since where you are to where you are now, and from those experiences, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I think it's funny. Like when I start, in I feel like middle school, for those of y'all that went to middle school, like is one thing, and then you recognize that like when you get to high school, things are just a little bit more serious, right? Because every grade from freshman year to senior year, or freshman year to middle of junior year impacts your transcript, which impacts where you're going to school. And I remember my freshman year, like I almost failed physics. I think freshman year, like we did physics at the time, and I had no idea what was going on. And I remember my parents saying like you should do summer physics, and I resisted, and like the result was like a C- or something, like pretty wild. And so I think like I always kind of came in like knowing that I had to work hard, and that like I'm pretty smart, I guess reasonably smart, but like I definitely wasn't one of those people that just like had it naturally, and like I didn't start off well academically, and kind of like knew I had to like dig myself out of a hole, sophomore, junior year, into senior year to put myself in the position where I wanted to be, and I think that like transition into college where like you go, McDonough's obviously a very talented school, and then you go to college and everyone's talented because they're the best at their schools, and you realize you need to like continually step your game up. And so, you know, I'm a big believer in it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And like I'm like a true testament to that, where like, you know, I maybe have been slow to get started at certain times, but I'm like the Baltimore Ravens, where you know the fourth quarter is going to be exciting.
So how did you feel McDonogh prepared you for like that transition into college? Like, do you think that McDonogh prepared you well for that?
Yeah, I think it was great. Like we were kind of talking about earlier, McDonogh puts you around a bunch of different types of people from a bunch of different types of backgrounds, and that's like what life is, and that's what college is. It's like what what the real world's like, and just being able to be empathetic towards like people that are different than you and like understand where people are coming from. I think McDonogh does like a great job of exposing people just to like different stuff. And like if you went to other types of schools, maybe it would be more homogenous population of people. And I think like the diversity of McDonogh is really great. And like I think coming into Penn, I felt comfortable speaking with anyone from any background, and knew that like at McDonogh they're exchange students, and like talking to exchange student, you might have to like start a little bit more rudimentary with certain things, and then know that they'll build up over time, just like in any other organization or in any other population of people. So I mean, I think McDonogh, I have all positive things to say.
Cool. And then socially at Penn, so we wanted the Penn questions now, I guess.
Yeah.
So you mentioned at McDonogh how you were like really outgoing, like knew a ton of people, like widespread, which is super cool. Did that start right away at Penn, or did it take time to build up to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been really big on like bringing people together, and so I would say college is totally different, but it was just really an extension of that, where I definitely like played a big role in like getting whether it's like guys that I played with in the football team or athletes more broadly, or just like the broader student population together in a variety of social roles.
Cool. What were some of those roles? Would you say?
Like throwing parties, whether it was for like a kind of sports related event, whether it was a fundraiser, whether it was just a broader kind of social event. I always have done a good job of bringing people together and having fun.
Got it. Cool.
Has that skill come in handy in your professional life since then?
Definitely. I mean, I think I've been at a college 10 years and almost like 15 at McDonogh. So life changes in different ways over time. And certainly when I was right out of college, I was throwing a bunch of different events, and it was a great opportunity to network and meet new people. I would say post pandemic, and like even in business school, like I was a social chair of social chair of like my it's called a cluster, and it's like it's like 10% of like the school. They break the school population into like 7 groups of 10 or 10 groups of 10 really. And so I was like the social chair of my cluster organizing events. But I would say post pandemic, I've definitely like taken a step back. Like I just don't want to be. I'm trying to do less and focus more on myself. And so, but yes, to answer your question, it definitely helped a lot.
Gotcha. How are ways that you didn't focus on yourself earlier?
I think, when you're doing these things like hosting events and like you're like inherently being very thoughtful about other people, because you want things to be right. You want to make sure everyone's having a good time. And, if you're spending time focusing on other people, that's time you're not focusing on yourself. And so, for me, like just there's been a broader priority shift where like, I like no one's gonna like pay my bills, right? Like no one's waking up saying like, how can I help JP today? And so, I need to make sure that I'm doing the requisite time to make sure that like I'm in a good place. And then once that's all taken care of, sure, like I can go like do whatever with whoever. But, right now I'm just trying to be more deliberate about how I spend my time.
Gotcha.
So could you talk a little bit about, I guess this is kind of jumping forward, but like spending time on yourself, like the work-life balance of where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. we're in the building that I live with my girlfriend, and so like she is a really important person in my life, and so I want to make sure like we're developing our relationship and we're spending like time together, and not just like spending time like sitting in the apartment like watching Netflix, but like doing stuff and like traveling and like seeing different things. A big thing for us has been right now is actually like looking at moving back to Baltimore. And so we've been like looking at places down there and going through that process now. I'm really like I think played sports all throughout McDonogh into college, and like over time it's very easy to get caught up in like doing work, seeing people doing all these things, and like not focusing on like physical fitness. And so that's something that like I've tried to be much more deliberate about as well, about like ensuring that like I'm putting in some work and like getting a little bit better physically, so that like I'm in a better position when it comes to work to like have more energy and to do a better job there.
I totally relate to that because I play tennis and we all play sports on varsity levels, and like at UVA I'm not going to be able to play on the actual teams because I just won the national championship like 2 days ago. They're just really good.
Yeah.
Like I'm solid but not like that good.
Yeah.
I'm like super competitive, so I'm going to look for ways to like fill that competitive void. I love working out.
Yeah.
So could you talk more about like how you've like found like the like sort of like purged your passion for like football and like working out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always loved to compete in like whatever I'm doing, like athlete, whether it's like fantasy football, whether sometimes I would like we've had people over for all the Ravens games, and you would think I'm on the team the way I'm acting during the game. Obviously, like I sit at my desk in my apartment and do my job at this point with the pandemic, and my job's fully remote, but I still like to compete. And so whether it's like going to a boxing class where, I'm not like fighting, but, it's like a sport inherently that is like competitive and like defense and attack. A couple years ago, I actually did like a charity boxing event as well, and so like that was like my opportunity to like really train for something and like get better and like fortunately win. There's certain workout classes that just kind of have that that I go to that are kind of more akin to what you would do at McDonogh as part of like off-season training, where it's like group training and competition and stuff like that, to like even if it's like an hour workout that I'm doing with some random people around the city, it's my opportunity to kind of show off a little bit and to push myself and to see what I can do.
Cool. What about like in the business world? Have you been able to compete like from your computer and like compete with other people at your company or other companies?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm in a kind of sales type of role now,
okay.
and inherently there's a scoreboard, right? It's like, what have you done? And that's something that drives me, because I want to make sure that I have my points on the board and I'm able to attribute, the company has done this, but JP has done like X percent of that. And so for me, it's like it's a similar competition where it's like I want to grind. I want to make sure I'm doing the things to put myself in positions to score. So certainly that all translates from the field where I formerly was into the corporate world where I am now.
Got it.
Could you talk a little bit about the 6 years after coming out of college in finance, kind of like what that was like? I think you mentioned that's not really what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And kind of resetting, going back to business school. Can you talk about like how you figured out you didn't want to do that, or maybe what you did want to do?
Yeah. It was a great opportunity coming out of undergrad, where you're like a lot of these banks put you in like analyst programs where there'll be call it like 40-50 analysts that are like fresh out of college from all the top schools that y'all are going to, and everyone's working on different teams, but they have like training programs where you get to meet the other 50 from around the world, and you all start together, and it's like provides like an opportunity to network. It provides an opportunity to have connectivity around the rest of the company, where if I need help with something in the department you're in, I can reach out. I have a warm relationship. And so it was a great place to start. It was a great place to like understand, finance and understand how things work. An environment like that teaches you a lot of like hard skills in terms of like whether it's like understanding how companies work, understanding how financial markets work, understanding how decisions are made. From like a soft skills standpoint, it definitely teaches you a lot about yourself. inherently there's like a lot of time that you spend working, and as generally like the low person on the totem pole, you get a lot of the work that's maybe like less desirable, and that you need to do that in addition to all of your other responsibilities. And so, you know, after over 6 years, obviously you rise up, but the grind doesn't stop. And you know, when I looked up at the people that, you know, were the most senior people that I was working with, I didn't want to be them. And at least at that point, you know, at you know, 27 or so, like, you know, I wanted to see something else. And knowing that I achieved success there, I'd gotten promoted, I'd done, you know, I've been tracking really well, but I knew that would always exist. And I felt like I was in this cycle where I was working really hard, and then I would, you know, go out, see friends, but I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing and wasn't being very intentional about what my next steps were going to be. And business, like, I could have done this in a variety of different ways, but I chose business school as an opportunity to like take a step back, meet new people that weren't, you know, finance, meet new people that, you know, came from different perspectives, different places around the globe, and like think really intentionally about like who JP is, what type of life do I want to live, where do I want to be, what like people do I want to be around, in a way that I really wouldn't be able to do while I was working, you know, in an environment like that.
Got it. You want?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you mentioned, you know, you weren't exactly where you wanted to be coming out of college, and then, but now, maybe in 5, 10, 15 years, do you have any aspirations of where you want to be, professionally and I guess personally too?
Yeah, I mean, I would start with like the personal first. Like I'm just trying to be happy, and like wake up like the majority of the days being like, you know, this stuff's pretty good, and like whatever it is. And you know, like I mentioned, like during the pandemic, like was delivering food, and like in a way that was like therapeutic, right? Like given everything that was going on, it was like opportunity to like do something kind of mindless, like pick up food from McDonogh, you know, from wherever, deliver it to whoever, like the opportunity to think. And like that was cool, honestly, not something I wanted to do forever, but it was like cool for the time. And you know, I'm trying to like build up a toolkit. Like I have some finance experience. I'm in kind of a more sales commercial role now, which is very different than what I was doing prior to business school. And you know, there's no one thing I can say that like, oh, I want to do this forever. You know, I'm envious of those people that are so passionate about that one thing, that are able to do that. But I'm trying to be in situations where I can learn from people. I'm trying to be at places that treat people well, doing things that I find to be like some degree of interesting and not just collecting a paycheck. But like the most important thing to me is like just like finding like happiness and making sure that there's balance to do other things. Like I think it's very easy to get caught up in money and like some of these things that are important, but in certain instances can come at the expense of you know, compromising something that's also important to you.
Cool. I have another question on a little bit of a different sort of topic. So we talked to like you and a few other people, and all you guys are like super smart. And something that I've obviously super smart. Something that I've sort of wondered is just like, how do you guys just take in new information and learn besides like your experiences?
Yeah.
Like, how are ways that you grow your knowledge, grow your brain, grow your understanding of self on a daily basis besides like work, just like experience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm like, you know, I think this is like, I have like this deep sense of like imposter syndrome where like I think everyone else is smarter than me, and like that probably isn't true. Maybe true in certain instances, maybe not. It probably averages out to like, you know, not really, but you know, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But what I try to do is just talk to people, and like that kind of gets into like what I was saying at the beginning about just like being able to kind of talk to anyone from wherever, and like having something to kind of bring to the table where a lot of people can bring different perspectives to a conversation and highlight things that you didn't originally think through or didn't even know. And so I try to just get in front of people, check in with people, say what's up, just to like catch up, and you know, if it dovetails into, you know, work or something else, like cool, but just like to have those touch points so that I know like if I have a question on something specific, I can reach out. I try to read a lot, whether it's like newsletters, whether it's like the Wall Street Journal, just to like have a pulse on what's going on in the world. Just because like, you know, again, it's easy to get caught up in like everything you're doing on the day to day because you need to do your job, you need to do your schoolwork, you need to do like whatever. But I think it's really important to keep a pulse on like what's happening like at the top, like really big picture, because that like at some point will drive, like that will impact your life in some capacity at some point. And so just having a pulse on that and being able to like kind of like forward anticipate, you know, what could happen in the future, I think that winds up being really helpful.
And then you talked a little bit about like staying in touch with people. Is there any like, are there any McDonogh connections that have maybe helped you develop new knowledge or helped you like in your professional life?
Definitely. You know, I think they're like Garnett, who you all are meeting with, I think later today, him and I got dinner last week, and there are a couple other people that I stay in contact with, and maybe it's not, you know, every day or every week or even every month, but people that if I'm looking at, you know, places in Baltimore, I can reach out to about that. If there's, you know, NFTs, I can reach out to someone about that. You know, whatever honestly, and like whatever it is, and I think it goes back to, you know, what we were kind of talking about earlier about McDonogh and just like how unique of a place it is, where like people remember who you are, right? Like you don't change very much from 18 to 31. It's like you are kind of who you are. Maybe certain things have changed, you refine certain things, but they remember that like if you were, you know, cool, like if you're a good person in high school, like you're probably a pretty good person now, even if you haven't talked that frequently. And conversely, you remember who the people are that, you know, you may want to forget. So I think the cool thing about McDonogh has just been that like even post-graduation and sort of being out of that environment for a while, at this point, it's easy to reach out to people and just to have a conversation.
Cool. On a more personal route, first of all, congratulations on the potential engagement. Future engagement.
Yeah.
What are some of your family goals or ideas that you have in terms of like growing your family?
I mean, I think like at some point, you know, there'd be like a desire to have kids, but I kind of think like more like sequentially, like what are like the more immediate things and like how do I get to those? And so like, you know, obviously like getting engaged probably at some point in the next couple months. You know, also want to buy a place, right? And so like that's sort of like is the next step. And then like after that, it's, you know, how are like the financial markets? Do I want to, you know, maybe buy an investment property somewhere? Do I want to like something else? Mm-hmm. And then kind of can get into like more family planning. But I just want to make sure that all my ducks are kind of in a row, that like I've sort of planned out things, anticipated things ahead of time, so that like when it comes time to make some of these more like significant decisions, that I'm, you know, I and, you know, my future family are in the best place possible.
Cool. And then you talked a little bit about moving. How did you end up in New York? And I guess was that something that was related to work straight out of college, or more like a personal decision?
Yeah, it was related to work. Between even like my sophomore and junior year, in between my sophomore and junior year of college, I interned in New York and Connecticut, and then in between my junior and senior year, I interned in New York as well. And so, you know, upon graduation, I received an offer to join the company after I graduated college, and that's where the job was. So I moved up here.
Awesome. Is there any other questions?
Should we move on to advice?
Yeah, we should move on to advice. So yeah, in the end of each video, we sort of open up the floor for just general, like, final remarks that you would have for us and for, you know, the graduating class this year and for the next few years. So just anything that comes to mind that you want to say.
Yeah, I would just like take the time to get to know people, and even if they're, you know, not necessarily interested in the same things that you are, they come from a different background. Just like make an effort, and obviously if they're a jerk, like scrap it. Like there's no sense in that. But a lot of people have a lot of different things to offer that may not come off at first blush, but like there's very little downside to it, and there's infinite potential upside where like there's been random people that wanted to like get to know me for reasons I have absolutely no idea. Who again, like at first blush, I was like, who the heck is this guy? Like, why is he talking to me? And we developed like really strong relationships, and vice versa, where I reached out to someone kind of blindly and was like, I saw your background, just love to connect and like introduce myself. And relationships have existed, beyond that initial interaction. So the world's a big place. It's becoming smaller, with social media, with the ability to connect so easily, and take advantage of that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Awesome.
what you had to say. It was awesome. And this is a beautiful office, or this is a beautiful space, so it's just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can stay here as long as you want. If you want, like, I can't. I haven't heard it, unfortunately, but